My name's Stacy. I'm 32 years old. I live in Stores where I bought a house about 9.5 years ago. I have two dogs, Margot, who's a Rottweiler who's going to puppy training today, and Oscar, who's a mini dachshund. Um, I worked for Margarita's management group for about 14 years, and I went to Aqua. When I was 16 years old, actually when I was 15, I took driver driver's education because my parents wanted me to have my license, as did I, right when I turned 16. So I set up the appointment. I think it was right on my 16th birthday, if not the day after. The first night my parents let me take the car out, which they gave me a car. It was a little Fiero sports car. I was very excited about it. The first night they let me take it out, I got into a very severe car accident. I was following my friends trying to find the movie theater. I got to this intersection, and that's pretty much all I remember. I remember what song was playing on the radio. I know my friend was in the car with me. It was like 7 o'clock at night. And consequently, from what I've heard since then, I was hit by a very large car and spun me 2.5 times off the road into the woods. I did talk to an EMT a few years later who responded to my car accident, and he said that there was blood coming out of my ear. They thought my brain was hemorrhaging. He said that they were ready to pronounce me dead on the scene. I was rushed to Wyndham Hospital, where my parents, when they arrived, they asked my parents what my first language was, because I was in Spanish 3, so I guess when they were rubbing my chest bone, because then I was in the last stages of unconsciousness, I was swearing in Spanish. We had just had Spanish swear day. They decided to transport me to Hartford Hospital, where I believe it was 24 hours later, they told my parents I had broken my third vertebrae in my neck, I cracked my skull, and that I had a traumatic brain injury, and I suffered an injury to my right hemisphere of my brain. So after that, I was in Hartford Hospital for over 20 days. I went back to school. I didn't know who my friends were. I knew who my best friend was. I didn't know who anybody was. It was my junior year in high school, which is, the big year for your college grades. And I was put into like a remedial education while they were checking on me in my normal classes, and I was in all honors classes. They put me on a pass-fail basis in case I did get a bad grade. The only class that I had to take a pass in was Spanish 3, because I couldn't remember Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. Actually, the first police report that they wrote out about the accident had the incorrect footage. They said there was, I think, 21 feet of skid marks, and there was 121. They also said that the speed limit where the accident took place was 45 miles an hour, when it was really 40. And the accident happened under a caution light. So I had the flashing red light, and the other gentleman had the flashing yellow light. They may have issued me a warning for not yielding to traffic or something like that. They corrected the police report. They did put the correct speed limit on the police report. They put the correct, or closer to the correct footage of how much skid marks there were. And the guy got a warning for speeding. So then at that point, we both had a warning. But the guy wrote in there that he thought that the car accident was my fault because I just got my license. He wrote it right in the police report, etc. So, that being that I got my driver's license right when I turned 16, which meant right when I turned 18, there's 2 years for the statute of limitations, that I needed to find an attorney. And he met with me, I believe that afternoon or the next morning. I told him everything about my case. I brought him everything that I had. And he was kind of laughing. He was like, I think I have to serve the guy with papers today, because the statute of limitations will be up tomorrow. I believe it took like 4 or 5 years for the case to finally go to court. And I was all ready and gung-ho for my big case, because my parents had hired an investigator with Frank to like prove what had happened with the skid marks and like the brakes and this, that, and the other thing. And really, It ended up being that when I pulled out, I had a blind spot. So did he, but he was going, I think, 69.75 when he hit my car. And he actually, when he hit me, I was in my lane. So from his braking or whatever, we got to the courthouse. I was all excited. And I think they had already picked a jury, and we were right about ready to go in. And 2 minutes later, he came back. He was like, "You got it. It's all done." I'm like, "What?" But Frank McCoy, really, that changed my life. After I graduated from college, when I was almost after I graduated from college, my brain was tested, and I still had right hemisphere stuff that was wrong, the same stuff that was wrong beforehand. The guy couldn't even believe that I had made it through a Division I school. He asked me like how I studied, and I never got special help. He just didn't understand, but he wanted to understand because this kind of thing happens all the time. He said I was so lucky that it happened when I was so young. But now I have my own house, I have my own career, and I don't know if that ever would have been possible without, even the confidence that I got from having Frank on my side, let alone winning. I gave some for my dad to hold on to for safekeeping. I bought a car outright. I bought a house. I wouldn't have been able to do those things without that money in the bank. And I got to start my career with Margaritas, whom I worked for like 13 and a half years. And I was able to move up to Bangor, and even though I wasn't really making enough money to support myself, that I was able to do that. And I was up there for a year, and then I got my own restaurant and came back to Connecticut. And not that many people could have sacrificed, but if you want to do something badly enough, you have to sacrifice. And financially, I could sacrifice. But when I met with Frank, he could have looked at me like a Cracker Jack. I've been like, "You just turned 18." The statute of limitations was literally I think the next day that he served him that night. So kind of a little behind the ball. I've used him for other things. My brother's used him. My parents have used him. And when anybody asks me, if I recommend an attorney, and most people didn't have an attorney when they were like 20 years old and going to UConn, I would recommend Frank.